Every afternoon at 3:17, the shelter hallway settled into the same soft rhythm. The metal kennels clicked gently as volunteers finished cleaning, sunlight stretched through the dusty windows, and the faint smell of soap and dog food hung in the air. Emma wiped her hands on her jeans and checked the clipboard again. Vaccines done. Walks finished. Everything normal. Except for Oliver. Oliver was the quiet one. A medium-sized golden brown dog with patient eyes and a habit of sitting instead of barking. He rarely reacted to visitors. He never rushed the kennel doors like the others. Most people passed him by because he simply watched, tail still, as if waiting for someone specific. Then it happened. From the old radio at the front desk, a volunteer accidentally turned the dial, and a soft piano melody drifted down the hallway. Oliver froze. His ears lifted slowly. His head tilted. And then, for the first time since arriving at the shelter, his tail began to wag. Not excited wagging. Not playful wagging. It was gentle, careful, hopeful. He stood up, walked to the kennel gate, and pressed his nose between the bars, eyes shining toward the sound. A low whine escaped his throat, the kind a dog makes when recognizing someone they love. Emma felt a chill run down her arms. The song ended. Oliver stopped moving, and quietly laid back down, staring at the hallway. But the next day, at the exact same time, the same thing happened again. And that's when she realized. Oliver wasn't reacting to the music. He was remembering someone. Before we continue, remember to like, share, and subscribe for more heart-touching dog stories. And tell me, where are you watching from? The shelter always sounded busiest right before it became quiet. Buckets scraped along concrete floors. Water hoses hissed. Metal kennel doors clicked open and shut in a steady rhythm. Emma had learned the pattern within her first week of volunteering. Late afternoon meant cleanup, paperwork, and tired dogs settling into long sighs after their walks. Sunlight stretched low through the tall windows, warming the hallway in soft gold bands. Dust floated slowly in the air, glowing like tiny sparks. It was peaceful, in a working kind of way. She finished rinsing a stainless steel bowl and stacked it on the drying rack. Last row done. Mark called from the front desk. Almost, Emma answered. Just Oliver's kennel left. Mark leaned back in his chair. The quiet one? Emma nodded to herself as she walked down the hallway. Yes, the quiet one. Most dogs in the shelter barked the moment footsteps echoed toward them. Tails thumped loudly against metal walls. Paws scratched doors. Some spun in circles, hopeful and frantic at the same time. But Kennel 17 never made noise. Oliver sat inside, exactly where she expected. He wasn't small, but he wasn't large either. A golden brown mixed breed with a soft chest and darker ears that folded forward when he watched people. His fur always looked brushed even though no one had brushed him yet that day. He simply observed. His eyes followed Emma as she approached, calm and steady. No barking. No jumping. Just watching. "Hey, buddy," she said softly. His tail moved once against the floor. A slow tap. Not excitement. Recognition. Emma knelt outside the kennel. The faint smell of detergent and clean blankets lingered around him. Oliver stood up carefully and walked toward the gate, his nails clicking lightly on the concrete. He didn't paw at the door like the others. Instead, he sat down right in front of her. Straight posture. Ears forward. Eyes attentive. Like he had been waiting. She slid her fingers gently through the bars. Oliver leaned forward and pressed his nose against her hand, breathing slowly. Warm air brushed her skin. "You're a polite gentleman, aren't you?" Another small tail tap. Emma opened the kennel door slowly. Oliver stepped out only after she moved back, respectful, almost cautious. He stood beside her, not pulling, not pacing, just standing. She clipped the leash to his collar. Walk time. The moment they entered the outdoor yard, several dogs rushed fences and barked at passing cars. A truck rumbled down the road nearby, and a few dogs howled at the noise. Oliver didn't. He stood beside Emma's leg and looked toward the shelter entrance. Not the gate. Not the yard. The entrance door. Emma noticed it immediately. Something interesting over there? He didn't move toward it. He only stared. A long stare. Then he sat. She followed his gaze. The front door remained closed. A small bell above it chimed occasionally when visitors entered, but right now it stayed still. Oliver's ears lifted slightly at a distant sound. Not loud, just faint. A car passed somewhere beyond the parking lot. His tail moved once. He waited. 30 seconds passed. Nothing happened. Slowly, his ears lowered again. The tail stopped. Emma felt an unexpected tightness in her chest. It wasn't sadness exactly. It was anticipation. As if the dog had expected someone to appear. "Were you waiting for somebody?" she whispered. Oliver blinked slowly and looked up at her. For a moment his expression softened. Not anxious, not fearful. Hopeful. Then he turned away and calmly followed her across the yard. During the walk he stayed perfectly beside her, matching her pace without tension on the leash. Other dogs zigzagged, sniffed everything, pulled hard toward trees. Oliver didn't even stop at the grass for long. His attention kept drifting back toward the building. Every few steps he glanced at the entrance door again. They returned inside. The hallway had grown quieter now. Evening approached. Volunteers packed bags and gathered keys. The air carried the faint smell of kibble being poured into bowls. Emma removed his leash. Instead of stepping into the kennel immediately, Oliver paused. He looked down the hallway, toward the front desk, toward the door. He waited. 3 full seconds. Then, slowly, he walked into the kennel and laid down on the blanket. No circling. No adjusting. Just lowering himself carefully, and facing outward. Facing the hallway. Watching. Emma crouched beside the kennel longer than she needed to. She didn't quite know why. "Emma," Mark called. "You heading out?" "In a minute." Oliver rested his head on his paws, but his eyes stayed open. They remained fixed on the hallway entrance. Not on her. Not on the other dogs. On the place where people appeared. The shelter lights dimmed to evening mode, softer, warmer. Still he watched. "You think someone's coming back for you?" she asked quietly. His ear twitched at her voice, but he didn't turn his head. He kept looking forward. Waiting. Emma stood slowly. For the first time, leaving the shelter felt strange. As she walked away, she glanced back once more. Oliver hadn't moved. He was still lying there. Patient. And unmistakably expecting someone who hadn't arrived. She turned off the hallway lights. And somehow the building didn't feel empty anymore. Because one dog was still awake. Still listening. Still hoping. The next day smelled like rain. Emma noticed it before she even reached the shelter door. That cool metallic scent hanging in the air. The kind that softened sounds and made the sky feel lower than usual. Gray clouds pressed gently across the afternoon light. Inside, the building felt quieter than normal. Even the barking seemed softer. "Storm coming," Mark said from behind the counter, not looking up from the paperwork stack. Emma nodded and hung her jacket on the hook. "They always feel it early." "Dogs know everything early," he replied. She smiled faintly and picked up the clipboard. Routine helped the shelter run smoothly. Feedings, walks, cleaning, medication checks. Every task had a time, and every dog learned the pattern eventually. But one dog wasn't learning a routine. He was waiting for one. Emma walked down the hallway, shoes tapping lightly across the concrete. A few dogs greeted her loudly. One jumped against the kennel door with happy excitement. Then she reached kennel 17. Oliver was already awake. He stood when he saw her, not rushed, just attentive. His ears leaned forward and his eyes softened in recognition. His tail moved once, gently brushing the blanket. "Good afternoon," she whispered. He stepped forward and touched his nose to the bars. Same calm greeting. Same quiet presence. But today something else lingered. He looked past her shoulder. Down the hallway. Again. Emma noticed it immediately. "You hear something?" She paused and listened. Nothing but the hum of the overhead lights and the distant clatter of dishes from the prep room. She opened the kennel and clipped the leash to his collar. Oliver walked out beside her as usual. No pulling. No wandering. Halfway down the hallway, it happened. At the front desk, a new volunteer fiddled with the old radio. The dial crackled, shifting through static bursts and fragments of stations. White noise. Silence. Then, soft piano notes drifted into the hallway. Gentle. Slow. Clear. Oliver stopped walking. The leash slackened. Emma looked down. His body had gone completely still. Not fearful. Not startled. Still. His ears lifted high. His head tilted slightly to the right, eyes wide and focused toward the front of the building. His nose twitched, drawing in slow breaths as if scent traveled with the sound. "Oliver," she said quietly. He didn't respond. His tail began to move. Slowly. Back and forth. Not excited wagging. Not playful. Careful wagging. Like recognition. He took one step forward on his own, not pulling, just guided by something he seemed certain about. Then another. Emma let the leash remain loose. He walked toward the sound. Each piano note echoed softly along the concrete corridor. The melody was simple, repeating, almost familiar even to Emma, though she knew she'd never heard it before. Oliver reached the middle of the hallway. Then he sat, facing the front desk, facing the door. A soft sound left his throat. A low whine. Emma felt goosebumps spread along her arms. "Hey, what is it?" she whispered, kneeling beside him. Oliver didn't look at her. His eyes glistened, fixed ahead. His tail kept moving gently against the floor. His posture was straight, alert, hopeful, like a dog who finally heard footsteps he had been waiting for. The bell above the front door didn't ring. No one entered. Still he waited. 30 seconds. 1 minute. The music continued. Oliver leaned forward slightly, ears twitching with every note, breathing slow and steady. Once, he lifted one paw off the floor and held it midair, a quiet anticipation. Emma swallowed. "Mark," she called softly. "Can you leave the radio on?" Mark glanced back. "Why?" She didn't answer right away. Because she was watching Oliver. Watching the expression she couldn't explain. Hope. Pure gentle hope. The song neared its end. The final notes softened. Oliver's tail slowed. The last piano tone faded into silence. He remained seated, waiting. 5 seconds passed. 10. Nothing happened. Gradually his ears lowered. The raised paw touched the floor again. The tail stopped moving. His body softened, almost deflating. Not dramatically, just quietly. He stood up, turned around, and walked back toward his kennel without guidance. Emma followed slowly, heart suddenly heavy. Inside the kennel, Oliver lay down facing the hallway once more. He rested his head on his paws but kept his eyes open, staring toward the front entrance. The radio crackled again as the volunteer changed stations. No reaction. Emma crouched beside him. "Did you think someone was coming?" Oliver blinked once. His breathing slowed. But he didn't look away from the hallway. She stayed there longer than she realized. The storm finally began outside, rain tapping softly against the roof. And for the first time, Emma understood something wasn't random. It wasn't music he liked. It wasn't noise. It was memory. A memory he expected to walk through that door. She glanced at the clock on the wall. 3:17 p.m. Oliver's ears twitched at a distant car passing the building. He didn't move. But he listened. As if tomorrow, he would try again. The third day, Emma came early. Not scheduled early. Intentionally early. She told herself it was just to finish paperwork, but she knew better. Something had settled into her thoughts the night before. An unfinished question she couldn't quiet. It wasn't the wagging. It wasn't the whining. It was the certainty in Oliver's eyes. She pushed open the shelter door at 2:40 p.m. The building still carried that midday calm. Most dogs rested after their morning walks. Sunlight filtered softly across the floor, pale and warm. Mark looked up from his coffee. "You're off the clock today, remember?" "I know," she said, setting her bag down. "Just stopping by." He smiled knowingly but didn't ask. Emma walked straight down the hallway. Kennel 17. Oliver lifted his head the moment her footsteps echoed closer. He stood and approached the door, tail giving that same gentle single tap against the blanket. Recognition. "Hi," she whispered, kneeling beside him. He pressed his nose between the bars, breathing softly into her palm. His body was relaxed, but his attention drifted past her shoulder again, toward the hallway entrance. Always the hallway. She opened the kennel and clipped the leash. Oliver stepped out calmly. Today she didn't take him outside right away. Instead, she sat with him in the empty visiting room, a small space with 2 chairs, a worn rug, and a wide window facing the parking lot. Afternoon light warmed the carpet. Oliver lay beside her feet, peaceful, for a while. Then his ears moved. Just a small lift. He stood, walked to the door, sat facing the hallway. Emma checked her phone. 3:14 p.m. Her heartbeat slowed. She didn't speak. The building hummed quietly. A cart rolled faintly somewhere in the back room. Water ran through pipes. Everything normal. Then, a crackle. The old radio at the front desk turned on. She heard the faint shifting of stations. Static. Silence. And then, the same piano melody. Oliver froze. His head lifted higher than before. His body leaned forward, completely focused. The leash slipped from Emma's loose grip as he stepped into the hallway on his own. He didn't run. He walked carefully, purposefully. Each note seemed to guide him. He reached the same spot as yesterday, and sat again facing the door. His tail began its gentle motion. Emma stayed a few steps behind, watching. His breathing changed, slightly faster but not anxious. Expectant. His ears twitched with each piano phrase as if following a conversation only he understood. A small whine escaped his throat. Soft. Almost relieved. "He knows this," Emma murmured. Mark stepped beside her quietly. "He does that every time music plays?" "Not music," she whispered. "This song." The melody filled the hallway, echoing gently off the concrete walls. Even the other dogs seemed quieter, some lying down, some watching. Oliver remained perfectly still, eyes fixed on the entrance. The door didn't open. The bell didn't ring. Still he waited. 1 minute. 2. His tail never stopped. Emma noticed something new. He refused the treat she offered. He didn't even glance at it. Oliver loved food. But right now, food didn't matter. Only the door. When the final piano notes faded, the silence felt heavier than before. Oliver stayed seated, waiting for the next sound. For footsteps. For a voice. Nothing came. Slowly the tail stopped. His ears lowered. He stood, walked to the entrance door itself and sat directly in front of it. Closer than yesterday. Emma's chest tightened. "He thinks someone's late," she said softly. Oliver leaned forward and sniffed along the bottom crack of the door. Not searching randomly, carefully. Methodically. He inhaled deeply several times. Then he lay down. Right there. Facing outward. He didn't return to the kennel. 5 minutes passed. 10. Mark looked at Emma. "Should I move him?" She shook her head. "No, let him wait." They sat on the bench quietly. Rain clouds drifted outside, and distant traffic hummed along the road. The shelter clock ticked steadily on the wall. Oliver didn't sleep. He watched. After nearly 30 minutes, he finally stood on his own. No frustration. No restlessness. Just a slow acceptance. He walked calmly back down the hallway, back into Kennel 17. He lay down and faced the entrance again. Emma knelt beside him, her voice almost a whisper. "You've done this before, haven't you?" His ear twitched. She checked the intake chart clipped beside the kennel. She had glanced at it days ago, but now she read carefully. Name, Oliver. Age, approximately 6 years. Status, owner surrender, transferred through local authorities. No details. No explanation. She looked back at him. "You're not waiting for anyone new," she said quietly. "You're waiting for someone specific." Oliver blinked slowly and rested his chin on his paws. The hallway dimmed as evening approached. Volunteers left one by one. Lights softened to night mode. Still he watched the door. And Emma finally understood. This wasn't a reaction. It was a routine. One he expected to repeat again tomorrow. At the same time, 3:17 p.m. The question followed Emma home. It stayed with her while she washed dishes, while the television murmured in the background, even while she tried to sleep. Each time she closed her eyes, she saw the same image. Oliver sitting by the shelter door, tail moving gently, waiting for footsteps that never came. By morning she knew she wouldn't ignore it anymore. She arrived at the shelter earlier than usual, carrying a cup of coffee she barely drank. The sky was clear now after the storm, and sunlight fell sharply across the parking lot. Inside, Mark looked surprised. "You're becoming an employee without the paycheck," he said. Emma smiled faintly. "I need to look at Oliver's records." Mark raised an eyebrow. "Medical file? Intake file?" He studied her expression for a moment, then nodded and unlocked the cabinet behind the desk. He handed over a thin manila folder. "That's all we got when animal control transferred him." She took it carefully. The folder was lighter than she expected. Too light. She sat at the small desk in the corner office. The room smelled faintly of paper and disinfectant. A ceiling fan hummed quietly overhead. Inside the folder were only a few pages. A basic health check, vaccination confirmation, transfer paperwork, and a short note from animal control. Owner deceased. No immediate family present at residence during intake. Dog transported to temporary holding, then transferred to shelter. Emma's chest tightened. She read it again slowly. Owner deceased. Her eyes moved lower on the page. Dog recovered from residence. Calm behavior. Remained near living room furniture during retrieval. No resistance. Near living room furniture. She pictured it without trying. A quiet house, a dog waiting beside a chair. Waiting for someone who never stood up again. Emma closed the folder gently. "Oh, Oliver," she whispered. She walked down the hallway. Kennel 17. Oliver lifted his head when he heard her steps. He stood and approached the gate, tail tapping once in greeting. Same calm presence. Same soft eyes. But now she saw something different in them. Not confusion. Not fear. Patience. She knelt. "Were you listening for him?" she asked softly. Oliver leaned forward and rested his forehead lightly against the bars for a second. His breathing remained slow, steady, trusting. She opened the kennel and sat with him on the floor. He didn't climb onto her or seek attention. Instead, he sat beside her shoulder, both of them facing the hallway, facing the direction of the door. The clock on the wall read 3:05 p.m. She stayed. 3:12 Oliver shifted. At 3:15 his ears lifted. And at 3:17, the radio turned on again at the front desk. Static crackled. Then the piano melody flowed softly through the building. Oliver stood immediately. His tail began its gentle motion, faster than before. He walked into the hallway and sat in his now familiar place. His posture straightened, alert and hopeful. But today Emma didn't stay back. She walked beside him and knelt. "Who played this for you?" she whispered. Oliver's eyes never left the entrance. Each note seemed to pull him closer to the door. He leaned forward slightly, breathing deeper as if scent and sound were connected in his memory. She imagined a living room, late afternoon sunlight, an older man at a piano, a dog lying beside him, a daily ritual. Her throat tightened. When the song ended, Oliver waited longer than ever before. A full minute passed. Then 2. He stepped closer to the door and sniffed along its bottom edge, carefully, gently. His tail slowed but didn't stop. "Do you think he's coming home from somewhere?" Emma asked quietly. No answer came except the soft hum of the building. Finally, Oliver lay down at the door again, waiting. Emma sat beside him this time. 5 minutes passed. 10. She didn't move. After a while, Mark approached softly. "You okay?" She nodded, but her voice was hushed. He thinks the music means his person is about to walk in. Mark looked at Oliver. Then at the door. That song probably played every day, he said gently. Emma swallowed. Which means, he's not remembering the music. She placed her hand lightly on Oliver's back. His fur was warm beneath her palm. He's remembering a moment, she said. A moment that always ended with someone he loved. Oliver sighed quietly and rested his chin on his paws, still facing forward. Outside, a car passed the building. His ears twitched instantly. Hope flickered again, then faded. Emma felt tears gather, but she didn't let them fall. Instead, she stayed beside him on the floor, sharing the silence. She finally understood. Oliver wasn't confused. He wasn't adjusting slowly. He was following a routine that had never once failed him before. Every day of his life, that song meant someone was about to come into the room. And now he was still keeping his part of the promise, waiting for a person who didn't know he was still waiting. Emma stroked his back gently. I'm going to find your story, she whispered. Oliver didn't look at her, but his tail gave one soft tap against the floor, as if he heard, as if he believed her. The idea came to Emma quietly, not all at once. It formed slowly the next morning while she poured coffee and watched sunlight move across her kitchen floor. Oliver's waiting replayed in her mind, the posture, the ears lifting, the hopeful tail. The song wasn't just a memory, it was a signal. And if it was a signal, maybe she could understand exactly what he expected to happen next. That afternoon she arrived carrying something new, a small portable speaker. Mark noticed immediately. You bringing a party to the kennel? Just testing something, she said gently. He looked curious but didn't question her. Radio's been unpredictable anyway. Emma nodded and walked down the hallway. Oliver was already awake, sitting instead of lying down today. The moment he saw her, his tail tapped twice, a little faster than usual. You remember me, she said softly. He stepped closer to the kennel door and pressed his nose between the bars. She opened it and clipped the leash. Instead of walking him outside, she guided him into the visiting room again. The room was quiet, filled with warm afternoon light. Dust floated in the sunbeams from the window. Oliver circled once and lay down beside her chair. Relaxed. For now. Emma placed the speaker on the floor but didn't turn it on yet. She checked the time. 3:13 p.m. Her heart beat faster than she expected. She watched Oliver. At 3:15, his ears lifted. He stood before any sound had started. He walked to the door and sat facing the hallway. Emma felt a chill. You already know when it should happen, don't you? He waited. 3:17 p.m. Silence. No radio today. No music. Oliver remained still for several seconds, then slowly turned his head toward the front desk area, confused. His ears flicked back and forth. His body stiffened slightly. The routine had broken. His tail did not move. Emma swallowed. Then she gently pressed play. The piano melody filled the small room. Oliver reacted instantly. His head snapped toward the speaker. His eyes widened and his tail began wagging, the same careful, hopeful motion she had seen every day. He stood and walked to the doorway, then out into the hallway, guiding the leash forward. Emma followed, barely holding it. He reached the familiar spot and sat facing the entrance, waiting. But today something changed. He didn't just sit. He stood again and walked closer to the front door. Closer than he ever had before. His nose pressed lightly against the glass panel. He sniffed deeply, repeatedly. Then he looked back at Emma briefly, not asking but checking, as if she might help him. It's okay, she whispered, kneeling beside him. The music continued behind them from the speaker, echoing softly down the corridor. Oliver's tail wagged steadily. His posture remained alert but calm. Every few seconds his ears twitched toward outside sounds, distant cars, footsteps on pavement, wind brushing leaves. He expected a very specific sound. Footsteps approaching. He waited. 1 minute passed. 2. 5. He didn't lie down. He stayed standing. 10 minutes. The wagging slowed slightly but didn't stop. 15 minutes. A volunteer entered through a side door in the back hallway. The faint click echoed. Oliver turned instantly, hope flashing, but when no one appeared at the front entrance, he turned back again. Still waiting. Emma felt her chest ache. "He always came right after this, didn't he?" she whispered. Oliver leaned his head lightly against the glass door. 20 minutes. 30. Finally his tail slowed. The wagging stopped. He lowered himself gently to the floor, still facing outward. His chin rested near the door frame. He didn't whine. He didn't bark. He just stayed. Emma sat beside him on the floor. "I'm sorry," she said quietly, though she knew he didn't understand the words, only the tone. She placed her hand along his shoulder. His breathing remained steady but deeper now. His ears lowered slightly, though they still twitched at every passing car outside. The music finished. Silence returned. But Oliver didn't move. 5 more minutes passed before he finally stood on his own. Slowly, calmly, he walked back down the hallway to Kennel 17. No guidance needed. Inside the kennel he lay down facing the entrance again. The same position. The same watch. Emma stayed kneeling beside him. She understood now with certainty. Every day of his life before the shelter. That melody had been followed by a person entering the room. Dinner time. Evening routine. Familiar footsteps. Love. And Oliver still believed the pattern would continue. She rested her forehead briefly against the kennel bars. "You kept your promise," she whispered. "You showed up." Oliver blinked slowly and exhaled. A long, gentle breath. His eyes softened but remained fixed on the hallway. Waiting had become part of him. Emma stood after a while and picked up the speaker. Her decision had formed. The file hadn't told her enough. But somewhere, someone knew the man who played that song. And if Oliver was still waiting, she would find where the music began. The address was written in small print at the bottom of the intake report. Emma stared at it for a long moment before leaving her car. A quiet neighborhood sat at the end of a tree-lined street. Late afternoon light filtered through bare branches, and fallen leaves gathered along the sidewalks. The houses looked lived in but still, curtains drawn, porches empty, wind chimes moving softly in the breeze. She checked the number again. This was the place. The home Oliver had come from. For a second she wondered if she was crossing a line. She wasn't family. She wasn't even staff. Only a volunteer who couldn't stop thinking about a waiting dog. But she remembered the way he pressed his nose to the shelter door. So she walked up the path and knocked. The sound echoed lightly inside. Nothing. She waited. Then soft footsteps approached slowly from within. The door opened just a few inches, held by a chain lock. A woman in her early 30s looked out cautiously. "Hello." Emma kept her voice gentle. "Hi. I'm sorry to bother you. My name is Emma. I volunteer at the county animal shelter." The woman's expression changed immediately, worry first, then recognition. "The dog," she said quietly. Emma nodded. "Oliver." The chain slid free. The door opened wider. The woman exhaled slowly, almost relieved and almost sad at the same time. "I wondered where he went." Inside, the house felt still but not abandoned. Sunlight rested across wooden floors. The air carried a faint scent of furniture polish and something older, familiar, warm. A piano stood in the corner of the living room. Emma's breath caught. It was upright, dark wood, worn slightly along the edges from years of use. Sheet music rested open on the stand. She didn't need to ask. "You're his owner's daughter?" Emma said softly. "Yes," the woman answered. "I'm Claire." They sat at the kitchen table. Claire wrapped her hands around a mug but didn't drink. "Dad passed 3 months ago," she said gently. "Heart failure. It was sudden." Emma listened quietly. "I live out of state," Claire continued. "By the time I got here, animal control had already taken Oliver. The house had been closed for days. I tried contacting them but I never learned which shelter transferred him." Emma swallowed. "He's safe. Healthy. Very calm." Claire nodded, relief softening her shoulders. He was Dad's shadow, she said. Everywhere. Especially in the afternoons. Emma leaned forward slightly. Did your father play the piano every day? Claire looked up quickly. Yes. Her voice lowered. Same time. Every evening at 3:15. He said it helped him keep a routine after retirement. And Oliver? She smiled faintly, eyes glassy. Oliver never missed it. She stood and walked to the piano. Her fingers rested on the keys, but she didn't press them yet. He'd lie right here, she said, pointing beside the bench. Dad would play this one piece every day before making dinner. Emma's throat tightened. Claire pressed the first note. The same soft melody filled the living room. Gentle, warm, familiar. Emma closed her eyes briefly. She could almost see Oliver sitting in the hallway again, ears lifted, tail moving carefully. He reacts to this, Emma whispered. Every day at 3:17 he goes to the shelter door and waits. Claire stopped playing. Waits. He thinks your father is about to walk in the room. Silence settled between them. Claire's hand covered her mouth. Tears gathered but didn't fall yet. He used to come back from the garden right after finishing the song, she said softly. Oliver learned the order. Music. Then footsteps. Then dinner. Emma nodded. He still follows it. Claire sat slowly on the piano bench. I thought he'd forget, she whispered. Emma shook her head gently. He hasn't. Claire played the melody again, softer this time. The notes echoed gently through the house. Can I visit him? She asked quietly. Emma smiled for the first time that day. I was hoping you would. The next afternoon, Claire entered the shelter. The front bell chimed. Emma waited in the hallway beside Kennel 17. Oliver lay inside, watching the entrance as usual. The moment the door opened, his ears lifted. Not dramatically, just a small immediate alertness. Claire paused at the front desk. Hi, I'm here to see a dog. Emma stepped forward. Come with me. They walked slowly down the corridor. Oliver stood. His nose lifted into the air. He sniffed once, then again deeper. His body became still. Claire stopped several feet away. She hadn't spoken yet. She didn't need to. Oliver stepped forward to the kennel door. His tail began moving. Not the gentle, uncertain wag. A fuller one. Careful but stronger. His eyes locked onto her face. Claire's voice trembled. Hi, Oliver. The sound was soft, but familiar. Oliver made a quiet sound. Not a bark, not a whine. Something in between, low and breathy. His tail moved faster. Emma opened the kennel. Oliver stepped out slowly. He approached Claire carefully, sniffing the air first, then her hands. He leaned forward and pressed his nose against her palm. He paused, then gently rested his head against her leg. Claire knelt immediately, arms wrapping softly around his shoulders. I'm here, she whispered. Oliver exhaled. A long, deep breath, and his body relaxed for the first time Emma had ever seen. Not waiting, not searching, just resting. His tail brushed the floor steadily as he leaned into her. Emma felt her chest warm, because at last, Oliver wasn't listening for footsteps anymore. He had found someone who carried them with her. Claire came back the next day, and the day after that. Not hurried visits, not quick check-ins. She stayed. The first afternoon she brought a small cloth bag. It looked ordinary, soft blue fabric tied at the top with a loose knot. Oliver noticed it immediately. He approached slowly as she sat cross-legged on the visiting room floor. His nose lifted, drawing in the air before he even reached her hands. His steps slowed. His tail moved in soft sweeps. Claire opened the bag carefully. Inside was an old flannel shirt, faded gray, worn at the sleeves. She placed it gently on the rug. Oliver froze. He didn't jump forward. He didn't paw it. He simply leaned closer and inhaled. One long breath. Then another. His ears relaxed. Not alert anymore, not searching. His shoulders lowered, and for the first time since Emma had met him, his body seemed heavier, grounded. Claire's voice was barely above a whisper. "It was my dad's favorite shirt." Oliver lowered himself onto the fabric. Slowly, carefully. He rested his chin on it and closed his eyes. Emma stood quietly near the doorway, not interrupting. The room filled with late afternoon sunlight and dust motes drifting lazily in the air. No barking echoed here. Even the shelter felt calmer. Claire gently stroked the back of his neck. "You remember, don't you?" she said softly. Oliver's tail tapped once against the rug. He didn't get up when a cart rolled loudly past the hallway. He didn't look toward the entrance door. His breathing slowed into steady, relaxed rhythms. Emma felt a small, unexpected relief. For the first time, he wasn't waiting. Over the next week, Claire made a routine. Every day around 3 p.m., she arrived before the familiar time. And every day, Oliver met her at the kennel door with growing confidence. He no longer hesitated before stepping out. His eyes searched for her first now, not the entrance. Emma noticed the change gradually. The hallway still echoed with afternoon sounds. Volunteers chatted softly. Phones rang occasionally at the desk. But at 3:17 something different happened. Claire brought a small keyboard on the fourth visit. She set it on the visiting room table. Oliver sat beside her feet, watching calmly as she pressed the first note. The melody filled the room. Emma held her breath. Oliver's ears lifted slightly, recognition still there. But he didn't run to the door. He didn't leave her side. Instead, he leaned gently against Claire's leg and stayed. His tail moved in slow, peaceful motions. His eyes half closed, not searching now, but remembering safely. Claire kept playing, her fingers careful on the keys. "He used to fall asleep here," she said softly, "right beside the bench." Oliver lowered himself onto the rug, resting his head against her foot. The music continued. No waiting. No anxiety. Just memory without expectation. Emma stepped closer and sat quietly in a chair. "Do you think he understands?" she asked gently. Claire nodded faintly. "I think he understands enough." The last notes faded. Oliver didn't move toward the hallway. He stayed lying beside her. For a long moment, the shelter was silent except for his slow breathing. A few days later, Emma opened Kennel 17 in the morning and paused. Oliver was sleeping. Deeply. Not the light sleep he used to keep. The one where his ears twitched at every sound. His paws were relaxed, stretched forward, and his chest rose and fell evenly. She whispered his name. His eyes opened slowly, soft and calm. He stood and greeted her with a quiet wag, then looked toward the visiting room door. Not the entrance. Emma smiled. "Well, I guess you've chosen your person." Later that afternoon, Claire arrived again. Oliver walked to her without hesitation. He didn't check the hallway anymore. He didn't listen for distant cars. He pressed gently against her side and sighed. Claire knelt and wrapped her arms around him. "I think he's ready," she said quietly to Emma. Emma felt both warmth and a small ache at the same time. "You're adopting him?" Claire nodded. "I didn't know where he was before. But now that I found him, he shouldn't have to learn another home again." Oliver rested his head against her shoulder. His tail moved steadily, peacefully, and for the first time Emma noticed something missing. He never looked toward the door at 3:17. Not once. The waiting had finally loosened its hold. He wasn't holding on to the moment anymore. He was holding on to a person. The day Oliver left the shelter was quiet. No big announcements. No balloons. No celebration banners. Just a soft morning sun and the familiar sounds of keys turning and leashes clipping. Emma arrived early anyway. She told herself it was to help with paperwork, but she knew she wanted one last normal moment before everything changed. Kennel 17 stood open. Oliver was already awake, sitting calmly on his blanket. When he saw her, his tail began its steady, gentle wag, the one she remembered from the very first day. "Hey, buddy," she whispered. She knelt and scratched behind his ears. His eyes softened and he leaned forward into her hand, warm and trusting. He didn't press against the door anymore. He looked at her. Present. Not waiting. You're going home today. His ears twitched at her voice, and he gave a small huff of breath, almost like a sigh. Emma clipped the leash onto his collar and opened the kennel fully. He stepped out beside her. Confident now. They walked down the hallway slowly together. The building felt different today. Not heavy, not uncertain. Just calm. At the front desk, Mark smiled. So this is graduation day, he said. Emma nodded. Oliver stood quietly beside her leg. When the entrance bell chimed, his ears lifted, but he didn't move toward it. Instead, he looked back at Emma. Just for a second. She smiled. It's okay. You know who it is. The door opened. Claire stepped inside, carrying a folded blanket under her arm and a small bag over her shoulder. The familiar scent reached Oliver before she spoke. His tail wagged faster, steady and certain. Hi, Oliver. He walked to her immediately. No hesitation. No searching. He pressed his head against her hand and leaned gently into her side. Claire crouched and hugged him. Ready to come home? His tail swept across the floor. Emma finished the paperwork quietly while watching them. The shelter hummed softly behind her. Phones ringing, distant barks, volunteers chatting, but her focus stayed on Oliver resting beside Claire's knee. He wasn't alert anymore. He was relaxed. Outside, the air was clear and cool. Leaves moved lightly across the parking lot. Emma walked with them to the car. Claire opened the back door and placed the blanket across the seat. Oliver stepped up after a small pause, then circled once and lay down. He didn't stand back up. He didn't look toward the building. He settled. Claire closed the door gently and turned to Emma. Thank you, she said softly. You didn't just take care of him. You listened to him. Emma shook her head slightly. He told us what he needed. We just had to understand. Oliver watched them through the window, eyes calm. Emma touched the glass lightly. Be good. His tail thumped once against the seat. Then the car pulled away. Emma stood there long after it disappeared around the corner. The parking lot felt strangely larger now, but not empty. Just complete. 2 weeks passed. The shelter returned to routine. New dogs arrived. Others found homes. Kennels filled and emptied again. But sometimes Emma still glanced toward Kennel 17 before remembering. One afternoon her phone chimed. A message from Claire. There was a photo attached. Oliver lay in a sunlit living room beside the same upright piano. A soft rug rested beneath him, and his paws stretched comfortably forward. His eyes were closed, sleeping deeply. Another message followed. He listens when I play, but he doesn't wait anymore. He just sleeps beside me. Emma smiled. Later that evening she visited. The house felt warm, lamps glowing softly, the faint smell of cooking drifting from the kitchen. Claire sat at the piano bench and nodded toward the rug. Oliver lay there already relaxed. When he noticed Emma, his tail tapped gently, but he didn't jump up. He walked over calmly and leaned into her hand, greeting her with quiet affection before returning to his place beside the piano. Claire played the melody. The same notes filled the room. Oliver lifted his head briefly. His ears twitched once in recognition. Then he lowered his chin onto his paws and closed his eyes again. No watching the door. No listening for footsteps. Just peace. Emma sat on the couch listening. The music didn't feel sad. It felt complete. She realized something then. Oliver had never been waiting for the music. He had been waiting for love to return to the moment the music created. And now it had. Claire finished playing. The last note faded gently into the room. Oliver didn't move. He slept. Emma whispered softly, more to herself than anyone else. Some promises dogs never forget, but they don't need them forever once they know they're not alone anymore. The evening settled into stillness, and for the first time since anyone could remember, the melody ended without waiting, because the bond had already found its way home.